The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
Tonight on Politics Now, what to do about the border, why Nevada's senators want one of former President Trump's controversial illegal immigration rules to stay in place. Plus,
there was a minority of the board that wanted to take action, do my job.
CCSD Superintendent Dr. Jesus Jara talks to us for the first time about being fired, then rehired by the school board last year. And
I've had to work with our social workers more times than I can even count, just because so many kids are hurting.
The pandemic has left scars on children all across the country. We'll tell you what's being done here in CCSD in the Valley to help them heal.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Thank you very much for joining us here on Politics Now. I'm John Langler. We start with Nevada Senator Catherine Cortez Masto. She found herself in the middle of the immigration debate this week. Turns out she wants to keep a measure put in place by the Trump administration and have it stay in place. Title 42 is a measure enacted by former President Trump, and it allows the government to expel migrants seeking asylum without a hearing during a public health emergency, which you're in right now because of the pandemic. In the last 2 years, more than 1.7 million people have been expelled from the U.S. using this measure. The Centers for Disease Control plans to end the use of Title 42 May 23rd. Republicans oppose lifting it. They cite the record numbers of people at the border right now. Nevada Senators Catherine Cortez Masto and Jackie Rosen also oppose lifting it, at least without a detailed plan. Senator Cortez Masto released this statement saying, quote, "This is the wrong way to do this, and it'll leave the administration unprepared for a surge at the border." She went on to say we should fix the immigration system with border security and treating immigrants with respect. Well, Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf, boy, she set off a firestorm this week. In a morning television interview, she called Las Vegas, quote, "a gross desert." Her comments came while talking about this. This is the new potential stadium site for the Oakland A's baseball team. Of course, as you know, the team is considering moving here to Las Vegas. Mayor Schaaf's comments drew a sharp response from local politicians. Governor Steve Sisolak tweeted this GIF. This is, of course, a quarterback from the Las Vegas Raiders, Derek Carr, not the Oakland Raiders anymore, waving his finger no at this idea, this entire discussion. Also, this is from Commissioner Michael Knapp from Clark County. He called the mayor's comments ignorant and elitist. And Las Vegas Mayor Carolyn Goodman, well, she invited Mayor Schaaf to come here, check out the city, and yes, maybe attend a Las Vegas Raiders game. We'll see where that goes. In other political news, the Supreme Court now has its first black woman justice on the High Court. Federal Appeals Court Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson was confirmed this week by the Senate. 3 Republican senators joined Democrats in a 53-47 vote. All Democrats, including Nevada's 2 senators, Catherine Cortez Masto and Jackie Rosen, they all voted for her.
I'm the father of a young black girl. I know how much it means for Judge Jackson to have navigated the double jeopardy of racism and sexism to now stand in the glory of this moment.
Based on her record, I believe she will prove to be the furthest left of any justice to have ever served on the Supreme Court.
That's Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz. He and other Republicans say Justice Jackson is soft on crime. She's the first former public defender to sit on the Supreme Court. Justice Brown Jackson replaces outgoing Justice Stephen Breyer. Clark County School District Superintendent Dr. Jesus Jara and the school board, as you know, have had a contentious relationship. Last year, Dr. Jara was fired, then rehired by the Board of Trustees. Well, he recently sat down with Politics Now for an in-depth discussion about what happened from his point of view. Late last year, I don't have to remind you, you were fired and rehired by the school board. I think there are some lingering aspects of that issue that the public still maybe needs some answers on. I certainly have my own questions about it. But first and foremost, why did you stay at CCSD?
Why did I stay? You know, I'm going to tell you because what I see in our kids, I see myself in them. I was that kid. I was a student that, you know, I had to work to, you know, support my mom. My mom's 6th grade education, raising 5 kids by herself. I was that urban kid. And it was a school system that got me to where I am today. It was the teachers that helped me and supported me. I had counselors. I had very good ones, and I had some that were not so good, right? So then it kind of pushed me and propelled me into who I am as a leader and as a father. So I love this community. This is my community, and I love the kids. I do love the messiness, and we got a lot of work to do. And we have a great team that's doing some great things for us to improve the school system here.
But what happened? I mean, we can watch the school board meetings as well. I mean, you were there, obviously. What happened?
That's a question for the board.
Well, I mean, from your point of view, what happened? I mean, I mean, you weren't blindsided. You saw this coming. I mean, you had to see this coming down the pipe.
You know, I could tell you I work for the board. And from my perspective, and I'll just, you know, be candid with you and with the community, and I said it in my statement, there was a minority of the board that wanted to take action, do my job. As a superintendent, you work for the board of trustees, all 7. And you know, that's kind of where my position was all along, and it still is. I have the officers and the majority of the board that are focused on students. We're addressing and we're really looking at the needs. I mean, we have for the first time in my tenure since 2018 that now we're talking about student outcomes at board meetings. That's a welcome for me and for the team.
The board is basically the same right now as it was back in October, November last year. Did it ever cross your mind to not come back to Clark County School District?
It was, sometimes it did, and but you know, I felt the team that was in place, the principals, the staff, and there's opportunities. I said it last night, you know, there's opportunities that come all the time, but I see that we are at the cusp of really moving this district forward for the first time in a long time.
Okay.
Or I may just be stubborn.
Well, I know you said that last night too, I saw. How would you describe the relationship with the board now?
I think we have a really good working relationship.
We'll see where it goes, certainly. We covered a lot more about CCSD in the interview with Dr. Jara. You can watch it right now at 8newsnow.com. It's well worth a watch. Speaking of CCSD, seats on the Clark County School Board that have clashed with Dr. Jara, they're up for re-election this year. All 3 incumbent trustees initially voted to fire him. Current board chair Irene Cepeda, of course, she changed her mind, which is how the superintendent got his job back. She has 4 challengers. That includes Fernando Romero. He runs the popular Republican-leaning Hispanics in Politics program. Stephen Conger is another candidate. He is with the group Power to Parent, also running for that seat. District F trustee Danielle Ford, she has competition from 9 different people. That includes former Assemblywoman Irene Bustamante Adams and Jay Calhoun. He's a computer tech at CCSD and football coach at Desert Oasis High School. Former board president Linda Cavazos has 6 challengers, and they include Chuck Summers, a maintenance supervisor at CCSD, John Carlo, a man who calls himself Ghost Patriot 1776, also running, and Adam LaRosa, a candidate who says he wants cameras in classrooms. It's important, though, to note how school board elections work here in Clark County. It's a nonpartisan seat. Everyone in the primary runs against each other in their districts. The top 2 go on to the general election. So let's take a look at the primary election, the primary involving current board trustee Katie Williams for District B in the 2020 race. There was no incumbent and no overwhelming favorite. Williams got the highest vote total back then with 23.9%, and then went into a runoff with Jeff Proffitt, who had 18.7%, and beat him in the general election. Someone can win outright if they get more than 50% of the vote in the first go-round. An alarming mental health crisis among America's youth that only got worse during the coronavirus pandemic. A new study by the CDC found 1 in 5 teenagers early in the pandemic consider taking their own life. Lilia Luciano shows us what Clark County School District is doing to save lives.
Welcome.
In Nicholas Orr's Las Vegas high school classroom, he's teaching more than science.
Right where it says add file. I will be the first to tell you, you matter, you are loved, you are never alone.
Orr says his students returned from remote learning different.
I've had to work with our social workers more times than I can even count, just because so many kids are hurting.
And grieving. In the Clark County School District alone, at least 30 students have died by suicide since the pandemic began. Nationwide, the CDC says 44% of America's high school students reported they persistently felt sad or hopeless in the past year. To confront the challenge, the Clark County School District started a weekly social and emotional learning lesson.
Honestly, it does help a lot, like just that moment of like 5 minutes of talking about, oh, today was not the best day.
We met Sierra Vista High School students Maurice, Alex, and Giovanna as they discussed the topic of belonging.
Now that we're all back, I feel like a lot of people are more, like they're not as willing to just talk to someone new.
What was the impact of that? What are you seeing happening in the school?
People feeling alone, I guess, like they don't really have that many friends, or they feel like they lost a lot of people.
Principal Jessica Lovell brings a therapy dog to school every day and says her teachers know the job takes more than what's required.
Well, I think it goes back to that teacher as kind of have to wear different hats. So am I teaching right now? Am I a therapist right now? Am I talking kids down right now? Am I talking about what's happening in the world?
So go ahead and do that.
Nick Orr knows the consequences of missing the signs of distress.
But if I didn't see this in my own brother, someone with who I was living with, how am I going to see it in someone that I see for 84 minutes every other day?
In August of 2020, Nick's 18-year-old brother Anthony was among those 30 students the district lost to suicide. He had just graduated.
He was popular.
Yeah, popular. He kept everything hidden and on his phone, he didn't vocalize when he needed help.
Saving others is now his mission.
We need to take a lot of pressure off kids as far as grades and academics and put more pressure on happiness and well-being, and just it's okay to not be okay as long as you have a plan to get back to okay.
For Eye on America, Lilia Luciano, CBS News.
If you or someone you know is in emotional distress or a suicidal crisis, look at the number on your screen. It's the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, 1-800-273-TALK, 1-800-273-8255. Next on Politics Now, how vulnerable are we to cyber attacks? I'll speak with a UNLV professor on just how prepared our casino industry is for a potential attack from Russia. And dealing with long-term symptoms of coronavirus, the new plan to learn about how we are dealing with long-haul COVID.
Go to shophottubs.com.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
Ukrainian officials are urging people in the eastern part of that country to evacuate, to get out of the way as Russia sends more troops there. The mayor of Mariupol estimates 5,000 troops have been killed by Russia. And now Russia says that is where it plans to concentrate its troops, its forces. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., the Senate unanimously passed a bill this week to strip Russia of its most favored nation status.
The legislation will go a long way to landing a painful, severe blow on Putin's economy. It will hinder his ability to keep funding his war machine.
This week, President Joe Biden announced new sanctions against Russia's largest banks and the two grown daughters of President Vladimir Putin. Cybersecurity experts are worried Russia could retaliate against these sanctions with online attacks. I spoke with UNLV professor and cybersecurity expert Greg Moody.
What is happening in the cyber warfare world right now that governments here in Las Vegas, resorts, are watching and should be worried about?
Yeah. So cybersecurity, just like any other industry, goes through trends. And so various years, the main attackers within cybersecurity, they just start targeting new things because once they start targeting one industry, they threat those attacks and they block it. But other industries haven't been targeted as such, so then they shift industries and they start targeting the exact same attacks because they already have the tools, they already know how to do it, and different companies are therefore not protected. So they start hopping around until basically they picked all the same fruit from the different trees in the orchard. Russia, particularly the Russian mafia, is a very known purveyor of cyber attacks. They have a large industry where they just target the Western world and they steal information. How do they do that? Targeted attacks, and they are one of the main purveyors of dropping malware, and they're the ones that have the botnets, which is once they take control of machines. So they drop malware all over the place. When you go to those sites, you get infected, and they can take your hardware resources, and they'll get large botnets of 80,000 to 150,000 different machines, and they will sell that out to people to then do their own attacks or to run phishing email scams. And basically, they've taken your hardware and they rent out to others for other attacks.
How far ahead or behind would you say we are here in the U.S. to those entities overseas that are trying to poke around and fish and spread malware everywhere?
Right. So everything's cyclical. As soon as they do an attack, we get a defense. The main companies, they push it out, we patch it, we protect it. And generally, I'd say our readiness is decently well. The most advanced attacks that have been perpetuated in the world have not officially been announced that they were us, but unofficially everyone recognizes, like the large attacks that were launched against Iran to take out their nuclear facilities. That was with us in Israel.
How hard is the effort to try and get people trained to work in this field right now?
So locally, regionally, cybersecurity was not a big deal for a while. Ironically, the casinos will back this up. When I moved here in 2011, I was like, oh, let me reach out. I'll ask about, like, how's your cybersecurity? And they're like, we don't do anything. I'm like, what do you mean you don't do anything? Like, we have the gaming control board. If they're happy with us, then we're happy. That means we're good. And for, like, years, like, there's a payment card industry, like the credit cards. For you to accept credit cards, you have to have certain industry standards. They didn't meet them. They just said, we're going to pay the fine. That's a lot cheaper than updating all of our processes and systems and data to be in compliance with your security standards.
The way you're describing it makes it seem like Las Vegas it's kind of a blind spot when it comes to cyber security. Is that a fair assessment, or is it catching up?
So people do what they're motivated to do by the incentive structure. Casinos were dominated by the gaming control boards of Nevada. They said you have to do these to do gaming. So that's what they did. You didn't have to do any more.
Next on Politics Now, Democrats putting their money where their mouth is. We'll look at why they're making their biggest investment in 3 local congressional seats. When we
Sponsored by Albertsons and Vons.
You're watching Politics Now.
Congressional Democrats have their sights set on holding on to 3 House seats here in Southern Nevada. The House Majority PAC earmarked more than $11.5 million to defend seats held by House members Dina Titus, Susie Lee, and Stephen Horsford. Now, that's the most earmarked for any city in the country. In the Senate race, Republican candidate Adam Laxalt has come out in support of Florida's controversial new law about teaching gender identity in schools. Democrats have called it Don't Say Gay, that measure. Republicans say, though, this prevents teaching about sexual orientation to those under 3rd grade. Other states like Ohio and Texas, they're adopting similar bills right now, it's worth pointing out. Another Republican in the Senate race is Sam Brown, and he has a new ad buy out right now.
After 30 surgeries, years of recovery, turns out I'm hard to kill. I've built a family, a small business, a grassroots movement. It's America.
And that is the voice of Sam Brown. This ad, you're going to see it on local television stations. You'll see it on Fox News if you watch that. Brown, as you may know, was injured by an IED attack in Afghanistan while he served. What are the long-term side effects for people who have had coronavirus? A new effort is underway from the Biden administration right now to try and find out. The Department of Health and Human Services is looking into the effects and trying to create a plan, a national plan of action. Virginia Senator Tim Kaine says he's one of the millions of Americans feeling long COVID symptoms.
I had more like a blizzard of allergic reactions, but one of them was sort of instantaneously. I felt like all my nerve endings were tingling.
About efforts to tackle long COVID. Alex Limon from Washington, D.C. Alex, what are some of the long-term symptoms that are being seen right now?
Well, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Javier Becerra, talked about that a lot this week, and he says there really is just such a wide range of symptoms that are linked to what's now being called long COVID or long haul COVID, and they can vary from things like allergic-like reactions, rash-like symptoms, to very serious things like heart palpitations or irregular heart beating. There's also been a lot of reports of people's mental health being impacted by these long COVID symptoms. The kind of alarming thing about long COVID is that it can impact people in really different ways. And like I said, some of the symptoms can be even neurological, so some serious symptoms that we're talking about.
All right, so let's talk about what's being done in this plan to try and figure out more about long COVID and how to treat it.
Yeah, so some senators, including Senator Tim Kaine, had introduced a bill to try to fund efforts to deal with long COVID. So far, that's only in the beginning stages. But this week, Secretary Javier Becerra announced that President Biden tasked Health and Human Services with leading this nationwide effort, essentially, that will involve a lot of different government departments to try to deal with long COVID, and it will involve things like improving the care, services, and support that people get when they are dealing with it. Also enhancing education and outreach, because a lot of people who may be dealing with these changes in their health or health impacts, they may not know that it's necessarily linked to COVID or to their previous COVID diagnosis, and so education and outreach is a big part of that. And then also advancing research, because this is all still so new. You know, it's not like there's one test you can give people to figure out whether or not they're dealing with long COVID. It's really a complex issue and will likely have to involve a process of testing and elimination of various other diseases to try to figure out if that's what people are dealing with.
And that was Alex Limon from Washington, D.C. Politics Now. This week in What to Watch, the slow move towards legal pot lounges. Clark County Commissioners will hold a public meeting on cannabis consumption lounges April 19th. On the table for discussion, how many lounges, hours of operations, distance requirements from schools, for example, all up for debate. On Monday, the State Board of Education will meet, and one of the topics, getting CCSD in compliance with the state reorganization law. The state says essentially too many decisions are going through the central office at Clark County School District and not at the local school level. We'll follow that next week, but that'll do it for us this week on Politics Now. More news at 8newsnow.com. We're back next Saturday. Thank you for watching.